Hello again. This is Stephen Welsh, President of the International Chiropractors Association, with the ICA Weekly Update for the week of August 17th. Well, it looks like COVID is going to be around a while longer. So this week, I'm going to change up the format a little and divide my report into several segments. Now, as promised, I will finally review two of the fake research papers co-authored by Dr. Greg Kotchuk, and share with you the claims being made in those papers and explain what they mean and how the intellectually elite of our beloved profession is seeking to change it forever. And in doing so, in the name of science? I will then follow up with a recent example of how these fake research papers are being used right now to target our brothers and sisters around the world. But first, I'll begin with an opening statement and address the massive amount of misinformation currently circulating on social media about the changes in the ICA governance that was recently adopted by a unanimous vote of the ICA Board of Directors. Now, after that, I will give a brief COVID report of some interesting real science that is not being reported by the national media, but it reinforces the ICA messaging that has been for the past 5 months, that reassuring our docs and their patients that there really is no need for mass panic. So now, my opening statement. This past weekend, Dr. Claire and I celebrated our 50th anniversary, and we spent 2 days in Asheville, North Carolina at the Grove Park Inn. It is well known as the place where BJ wrote The Bigness of the Fellow Within over 70 years ago. Now, I had the opportunity to relax, to see BJ's picture in the Great Hall, and walk the halls of the original inn, and sit where BJ certainly spent some time those many decades ago. Now, having served in the ICA leadership during the past 4 administrations, and now in my 10th year as an officer of the corporation, I have seen both the good and the not so good. Now, I could provide a long list of actions by very passionate, committed, well-intentioned ICA past presidents that with 20/20 hindsight did not serve the organization well. But that serves no constructive purpose. You see, it is not about the past. It's about positioning the ICA for the future. And to do that, we must change and become a truly international organization. You see, the anti-subluxation movement outside the US is rising, and it has been for quite some time. But it didn't become apparent until March of last year in Berlin. You see, our profession won a huge political battle here in the United States over 30 years ago. Organized medicine may have lost the effort to eliminate us, but the signs are there. The battle is not over, and there are forces that are now attempting to contain chiropractic and to limit us to uncomplicated neck and back pain, to deny the existence of a subluxation, to limit the use of X-ray, to stop the care of infants and children, as well as to stop the ability to see wellness patients. So we must unify within the ICA and within the profession to guard the sacred trust and to protect and defend chiropractic. This week's message addresses the reasons to vote yes. It is finally time for us to come together to fight our real competitor in the healthcare marketplace, as well as the misguided enemy within. Well, that's my opening statement. Well, our first segment today will be the COVID update, and I'm going to share some excerpts from an interview that is not being reported in the media. An interview with Professor Sunetra Gupta from Oxford University that has recently published a paper suggesting that in some locations, we may already be reaching herd immunity the natural way. Now, that study was produced by a team at Oxford University, and it indicated that some parts of the United Kingdom may have already reached herd immunity from coronavirus. A significant fraction of the population, according to the study published last week, may have innate resistance or cross protection from exposure to seasonal coronaviruses, making the proportion vulnerable to coronavirus infection much smaller than previously thought. Well, let's have a look at a few of the things that she said during that interview about that study. Number one, what I didn't anticipate was that some of our responses to previous seasonal exposures to coronavirus might actually protect us from infection. You see, it's one thing to get infected and not ill, but what the new studies are showing is that people are actually fighting off infection. So at an even more basic level, the pre-existing antibodies or T cell responses against coronaviruses seem to protect against infection, not just the outcome of infection. Another comment that she made during that interview, the other interesting issue that I've suddenly realized with this particular threat is that people are treating it like an external disaster, like a hurricane or a tsunami, as if you can batten down the hatches and it will be gone eventually. That is simply not correct. The epidemic is an ecological relationship that we have to manage between ourselves and the virus. But instead, people are looking at it as a completely external thing. So then she went on with another observation. She said, maybe the way to counter it now is to say, actually, not only is it a good thing for young people to go out there and become immune, but it's almost their duty. It's a way of living with this virus. It's how we live with other viruses. Flu is clearly a very dangerous virus, but the reason we don't see more deaths from flu every year is because through herd immunity, the levels of infection are kept to a low as a level as we can get. And finally, and this is interesting, there are schools of thought in epidemiology, but like schools of thought in English literature, we tend to respect each other normally, rather than going on Twitter and issuing rather defamatory statements that some of my colleagues have been doing. Well, so what's the takeaways? Well, it seems that as more time goes by and more information is gathered and analyzed, it's becoming apparent that all is not as bad as it appeared when this virus hit 5 or 6 months ago. Now, don't get me wrong. It is a deadly virus, but for a very small segment of the population. And we must do a much better job protecting those at high risk. However, there's a growing body of evidence to suggest that the best defense against COVID is actually the health of the host. Well, that's my COVID update for this week, and a copy of the reference study can be found on our resource page. Coming up in our next segment is a look at the fake research co-authored by Dr. Greg Kotchuk. A couple of weeks ago, I introduced you to Dr. Greg Kotchuk, a very well-respected researcher from Canada. And while the academic freedom certainly permits Dr. Kotchuk the ability to formulate his own theories regarding chiropractic, I would suggest that in the research world, the combination of RCTs and expert opinion, with the exclusion of all other forms of evidence, does not constitute real, honest, truth-seeking science, but rather fake research, conceived and executed with a political agenda. So today I'm going to simply read to you some excerpts from 2 of the papers that he co-authored. They're commonly referred to as the divorce paper and the pseudoscience paper. And let's see what you think. So here goes. Let's start with the divorce paper. First thing that was said. The chiropractic profession has a long history of internal conflict. Today, the division is between the evidence-friendly faction that focuses on musculoskeletal problems based upon a contemporary and evidence-based paradigm, and the traditional group that subscribes to concepts such as subluxation and the spine as the center of good health. Okay. Next thing. The middle group, the chiropractors sit on a spectrum, and the majority fall in the middle. And this is how they practice. Whether you never know who and what will respond to spinal manipulation attitude, yet with some only attachments to chiropractic tradition. Now get that. Okay, that's the majority he's referring to, all right, here in the United States. Third thing that was said. We contend that members of the middle group will eventually have to choose sides between adhering to a scope of evidence-friendly practice relating to musculoskeletal problems or to a traditional approach aiming at treating a multitude of conditions through spinal manipulations. And next, virtually every chiropractor knows of other chiropractors who have x-ray every patient or sign patients up to long contracts or dubious family plans or prepayment plans or use high-pressure sales tactics or advertise unsubstantiated claims. Yet very few report these breaches. And so what was their conclusion? Well, quote, "We acknowledge that vitalism and other idealistic concepts based on theories and beliefs rather than scientifically accepted logic and evidence have a role to play in the public domain. They are, however, not compatible with the, quote, official evidence-friendly chiropractic profession. And to accept and protect such an approach is a serious issue, potentially one of public safety." Now, before we move on to the pseudoscience paper, I just want to read that sentence very carefully. They are not compatible with the, quote, official evidence-friendly chiropractic profession. I just have to wonder who's responsible for defining what is the official chiropractic profession. But anyway, let's move on to the next paper. And let's look at some of the excerpts from the pseudoscience paper. Okay, and I'll comment on one or two things as we go along. First comment, quote, "On March 20th, 2020, the International Chiropractors Association, a US-based chiropractic organization, posted a report claiming that chiropractic adjustments can boost immune function with the implication that it might be helpful in preventing COVID-19. Now, the first thing, yeah, the ICA did post a report, but we did not claim what they said that we claimed. And as a matter of fact, when you read the report, we claim just the opposite. But anyway, let's go on. Second, the ICA claim rests on two assumptions. Chiropractic adjustments have a beneficial effect on the nervous system. Second assumption, chiropractic adjustments will improve the immune system through the nervous system. All right, third comment in the paper, and this is a doozy. Any healthcare intervention must be evaluated for its clinical efficacy and effectiveness in well-designed random controlled trials before it is implemented in clinical practice. I'm going to repeat that one slowly. Any healthcare intervention must be evaluated for its clinical efficacy and effectiveness in well-designed random controlled trials before it is implemented in clinical practice. Think about that one. All right, how about the conclusion? The conclusion was, we call on regulatory authorities and professional leaders to take appropriate political and regulatory action against those making direct or indirect unsubstantiated claims that spinal adjustments can boost immunity or benefit patients with infectious diseases, especially coronavirus infections. Above all, these actions must aim to protect the safety and well-being of patients and the public. Well, are you beginning to see the political agenda? Well, if you think I and the ICA are overreacting to this obvious attack against how chiropractic is practiced here in the US, in the next segment, we'll take a look at what's happening right now in British Columbia. That's coming up next. Well, to begin this segment, I'm going to read to you a recent communication from the chiropractic regulatory body in British Columbia. And here goes. On July 15, 2020, the College of Chiropractors of British Columbia advised that it was in the process of analyzing the use of routine and repeat spinal radiography, such as x-rays, and anticipates amendments to the Professional Conduct Handbook as a result. These draft amendments are now posted for public consultation. The CCBC is asking that any comments concerning the draft amendments be sent in writing prior to 4:30 p.m. on September 8th, 2020. The summary will be published following the consultation period. Well, In essence, the regulators are proposing new rules that will require the presence of red flags before a chiropractor in British Columbia can take an x-ray. And these recommendations are based upon a research paper. Well, next we're going to take a quick look at that very recent research paper. Now here's some of the excerpts. In the absence of red flags, the use of spinal radiographs is not recommended. Nevertheless, factions of chiropractors, including the International Chiropractic Association, promote the use of routine or repeat radiographs to assess the structure of functions of the spine. Well, guess what the references are for that jewel? 13 and 14, Harrison, Kent, Betts, Practicing Chiropractors Committee on Radiological Protocols for Biomechanical Assessment of Spinal Subluxation in Chiropractic Clinical Practice, 2009. And Harrison and Siskin, ICA Best Practice and Practice Guidelines, Chapter 6. Well, let me remind you that these ICA guidelines had been accepted in the U.S. National Guideline Clearinghouse, and they were not based upon a rapid review that ignored most available evidence. Well, what was the conclusion in that paper? Well, we found no evidence that the use of routine or repeat radiographs to assess the function or structure of the spine in the absence of red flags improves clinical outcomes and benefits patients. Given the inherent risks of ionizing radiation, we recommend that chiropractors do not use radiographs for the routine and repeat evaluation of the structure and function of the spine. Well, let's take a look at the acknowledgments list in the fine print at the end of the paper. This study was supported by the College of Chiropractors of British Columbia, and this research was undertaken in part thanks to funding from the Canada Research Chairs Program to Pierre Cote, who holds the Canada Research Chair in Disability Prevention and Rehabilitation at Ontario Tech University, and from the Canadian Chiropractic Research Foundation. And just a side note, Dr. Cote is also a chair of one of the key committees of the World Federation of Chiropractic. Now, please remember, these papers are not written for or in association with the WFC. They just happen to be written independently, okay, by individuals that just happen to have those positions. And trust me, our criticism and our critique is not being directed at the WFC. It's being directed at these independent researchers, okay, that we hope by now you're beginning to see have been, let's just say, politicizing the research. Anyway, hopefully by now you're getting the picture. You're seeing what is happening to our brothers and sisters right across the border, and it can and will happen right here in the US if somebody does not take a stand. And right now, the ICA is the only organization that has thrown down the BS flag to the divisive politicization of research that is being foisted upon our profession by a small group of elitists that think they should be able to dictate to us how we should practice. Well, there you have it. Hopefully you're beginning to see why the ICA is changing and why we need more unity within the profession. See, it's time to be inclusive, not exclusive. It is time to set aside past differences and to work together to preserve what the world so desperately needs. Well, that concludes my report for this week. Meanwhile, please check out the ICA COVID research page where you can read the studies referenced in today's message. And doctors, please share these messages with friends and colleagues. And meanwhile, please reach out and connect with the ICA. If you're an ICA member, thank you for your support. And if not, now is the time to join us as we protect and promote vitalistic, subluxation-based chiropractic worldwide. We are here for you to help you help your patients because they still need that reassurance that there's no need for mass panic. And don't forget, you are truly their beacon of hope. And we will get through these challenging times, and we will do it by working together. Thank you.